Welcome back to episode 4 of Soul Talk. Today we are going to be talking about creation, and we're diving right in with Jenna Greengold taking the floor because she got some downloads this morning that are going to guide us in this experience. So it's all you, babe.
Okay. Okay. So this morning when I was driving, I was just had this whole definition of creation drop in. And the first thing that came forward was that creation is energetic attunement to service and to desire. Like at its core, that's what it is. And from the quantum sense, everything that already exists energetically and in general, everything already exists, right? Like there's nothing that actually needs to be quote unquote created from a traditional like human understanding, like painting or drawing. Like nothing needs to be done with your hands. You don't need to do anything. It all already exists. And coupling that from like a scientific sense, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It already is, right? So again, there's nothing that we need to do. It's just a matter of us attuning to the frequency of what we desire or how we serve. Both. It's the same thing. Because when our desire is soul led, it is service. So yeah, the main thing there was just that creation is the attunement. It's the attunement. And then you can bring that into density by aligning with the frequency of it. I don't know. What do you think?
Nino.
Hmm. I will. Ah, this is so good because what I was getting just moments before this is there's nothing to create. And for me, what that's become is there's no creation, there's only birthing, right? That it already exists. We're just bringing it, like you said, we're bringing it into density. And that's that birthing, what we have quote unquote called manifestation, creation, making. But I so love soul-led desire equals service. They're the same thing. So all of creation in the sense of the definition you've given is us just aligning with that, aligning with the way that source desires for us to create service. And the flavor and the texture is what we get to add to what already exists based off of our unique frequency in this unique moment in time, and all of the experiences we have inform what that creation looks like in form here in the 3D. But the energetic base of it doesn't need creation anymore, which I love. Laura, what do you want to add to this?
I'm feeling it feels like as you guys are describing this, I'm just being present with like the sensations and the energy that's coming alive around like the conscious content and conversation. And to me, it feels like I am a filter. So it's like I choose the creation of something within the density of the 3D is activated when I decide to attune. And when I decide to attune, I'm simply in this receptive space, right? And the divine expresses through me. So it's like we talk about soul-led desire equals service 100% because that desire leads me to choose attunement. And in that choice of attunement, I'm then deciding to be in receptivity. And as I receive, it just kept coming forward as it's creation is simply an expression, right? It's just an expression. And so I'm allowing the expression of source energy through me as a filter. And so what comes through the pores of myself, like you said, Nino, is going to feel and look differently depending on my texture. So I'm just feeling it in terms of like this energetic visualization. And I think this is being invited forward now just so that people can come into that in a meditative way, right? And recognize like what that looks like when we're putting it into a stepwise space. Like because it it's like you and I were talking, Nino, before we started, that surrender to source energy, receptivity of source energy is not this passive experience, right? I am choosing to create here. I'm not just letting things flow and being like, oh, okay, hello, and let it just pass through me. Like I am deciding to attune, because when I decide to attune, I refine I refine the concentration of that. I'm not just kind of like receiving willy-nilly. I'm saying like, okay, I'm actually choosing to come into like willing relationship is the free will part because we are human beings. I'm coming into to willing relationship with this, and recognizing the 3D creation as this expression of source through my filter. Okay, does that make any sense?
Yes, yes, it does. I will be a voice. Yes, it does. You're muted. You're muted. What are you saying?
I said, yes, the people don't like the pauses, be a voice.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, just as like a random anecdote here, because it kind of goes with what you were saying with flow. And it's not just necessarily flow, it's still active choice. Um, I mean, active choice into flow, you know what I mean? Um, so like on Saturday, I was really upset and I was thinking about different types of service. And I was so in my mind about how I want to serve in like different ways. And it kind of goes to what we were talking about in like the prior video that we did on service. So it was kind of like that, but I got kind of sticky in my head, right? Thinking about service and how I wanted it to flow because it was felt like I was in my head like, is this my ADD when I'm just like thinking of like 10,000 different things and how I want to do it and how I'm receiving it from source, right? And then it's like, so I'm driving and I'm on the highway, and you know how you can kind of get very like autopilot-y when you're driving. So I was in that zone, and this car comes up behind me, and it pulled me out of it like that because it came up like close, and it came around me, and as it comes around me, y'all, the the license plate on it was I create. Like that was the license plate. And I just like busted out. I'm like, okay. I was like, all right, yeah, okay. And it was just like heard, loud and clear, heard you. And it's very much just like just flow into it. Stop trying to put it into a very specific direction. Just receive it and create.
So I want to ask you, Jenna, before we close up on that, like, what do you do when you receive this energy from source and it feels very ADD and all over the place? Because I think that is a very important piece with how we receive. Like the way that I described it was more energetic. But yes, it can activate the nervous system and it can make the mind, come up with all these ideas. So what have you found to be supportive in kind of honing creation?
I think a lot of the time sometimes I'll do something concrete with it, like just write it all down, and then I'll feel into the frequency and feel where I am most led. Feel where, and not try and make it mean anything. But it's very much just feeling into the frequency of it. And again, at that point, then you're much more out of your head and you're in attunement and alignment with what you're wanting to receive and how you're wanting to serve. So it then becomes more pure and um, less nervous system at that point.
I have something I want to add before we close this out completely. Um, what kept coming to me was chaos of creation. If you ever see like these beautiful artists, chefs, all of this, there is chaos in the midst of creativity. It is that surplus of thought, that surplus of inspiration, and we just have to grab one thread and run with it and allow everything else to just come, because when we think about everything is already created, everything is already in existence. There's no way to singularly pull out one concrete form until you let it all come in and filter and be raptured by the frequency of all that exists. And then when we start filtering it through, writing it down concretely, saying, oh, this is where I feel most led to express this, then it all kind of comes into formation, right? It's like that waterfall that, you have those rapids that fall into the most perfect, beautiful form of this waterfall. But it started with chaos. It started looking like dangerous, unkept, ADHD like, right? And that nervous system is just waves of energy that are percolating through all of us, right? And so just allowing that to happen and not make it mean something is when we get out of our head of the body feels all of this energy. The body wants to do something with all of this energy. But can I take my mind and place it aside for a moment to just let myself be consumed by creative force and then go forward, right? We don't have to make it always nervous system regulation. Sometimes it's good for the body to feel this state of chaos inside of it where the cells are just bouncing around because that's just pure frequency. And can we embrace it? Can we love it for what it is and move with it? The body knows what to do with it. It's the mind that we have to say, hey, it's okay. We can love this and we could hate this, but it's gonna create something so beautiful that let's feel it and allow the body to filter it. That's all I have.
Yeah, I really love what you're saying. There's a couple things that came forward as you were talking. I love that you brought up this concept of chaos of creation and the discomfort that can exist within that, right? Because that's an attunement in itself from source to us, like attuning us to. Like we can choose to attune. It's like, okay, well, you said you'd receive the attunement, but now you're freaking out and figuring out what the hell you're supposed to do with all this, right? And it's like, actually, it's what you said, Nino, like we know what to do with it. And what came forward as you were talking about this surplus of inspiration, right? And grabbing one thread. It's like, to me, can that feel fun? Because what's happening there is when we receive this surplus of inspiration, like you said, everything already exists. Like it's already in existence. So if I'm receiving all this, I'm actually, it's like being in the tunnel in the Willy Wonka chocolate factory when he goes on the river and he goes through the boat and there's like all those images going on in the tunnel. And it's like I get to see, holy shit, I'm being given I am a witness on the wall of consciousness because all of this exists. All of this is being created. All of this has already been created. All of this is coming into creation somewhere on this planet. That is so fucking cool. Like that is really fucking fun. And so when I get to see that, it's like, oh, yes, let me watch all of these images on the wall like I'm going through the Willy Wonka tunnel. And even in that tunnel, there was fear there, right? There was fear there because that's the nervous system being like, holy shit. Oh my God, these are the nervous system waves that you were talking about, Nino, right? And not making them mean anything, but being like, thank you, Source, for like showing me the kaleidoscope of everything that's out there. And it's like, I'm giving you, like you said, that energy is pure. I am giving you the purity of this energy that's being created everywhere within universal consciousness. You get to witness it without overwhelm, but with curiosity and like wonder and like, wow, look at everything that exists. Look at everything. And then you're able to say, like Jenna was saying, like being in presence and like, okay, now I'm feeling into sensation of this. Where is my unique role meant to fit within this sea of creation, right? And the body does know. And so when we allow ourselves to witness and be in presence of all of this chaos, we're letting it settle. we're like enjoying and appreciating what's being shown to us. And when we enjoy and appreciate what's being shown to us, then it settles faster. So that's what came forward for me.
Can you do me a favor and write down witness on the wall of consciousness? Because Jesus Christ. Right. Yeah, just go ahead and write that down for yourself. Thanks.
Tell me
I
what that
agree with
means
you.
to you, Jenna. Tell me what
Oh,
that means.
it made
Just,
me very tingly and
yeah,
I
great.
can't sit
I
still.
like the tingly. I want more than that.
No, I can't sit still. I really liked that because it allows you to see that it's all not just already created and all already there, every feeling, every thought, every action, every idea, everything has already been in existence. But it also allows you to know that we are all the same. We are all one and we can all already tap into it ourselves. Anybody can at any given time.
And it brings us together more. It makes us more collaborative. It's more of that new earth frequency, that oneness frequency of like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. Like all of these people over here are doing this and they're doing that. And it's like, oh, what do I get to do? What do I get to do? Right. So it's coming from a place of more excitement and eagerness and play and like, oh my gosh, yay, I know I've been invited to the party too, right? Am I going to make balloon animals or am I going to decorate the cake? And so I think that's what's cool is like being able to look at that surprise around the next corner of like, what is God showing me? Like, what is source showing me as to like where I get to contribute to this party? What's coming up? Or Jenna, do you have something?
No, Nino, go. I see it on your face.
Yeah, thanks. I was just getting imagery of a festival or a craft fair where you have all of these different tables. Everyone has their niche, everyone has the one thing that they've created, and sometimes you see duplication of the same thing. And when you go table to table and you're like, oh, they're making wreaths and these are making wreaths, but they look so different and like how fun it is to see each of our unique spin and filter and texture of what we do with that same energy, right? Because the energy is the same. Our filter is the only difference in how it comes into form. And if you go into like this bird's eye view of this fair festival and you see all of the things that you think don't go together, but when you walk through it, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so fun. I get to experience it all. Oh my gosh, it's so fun. This look like it shouldn't go together, but somehow it works. That's our humanity, that's our spiritual nature, that's creation itself. That's why like the things that you just think don't go together, when you see it together with somebody's specific lens of creation, oh, it becomes so beautiful. Like, who would think graffiti? Like, in certain areas, it looks hideous, right? You think like there's a certain group of people who think this is hideous. There's another group of people who are like, no, this is my expression. And because it's my expression of my pain and my suffering, it is beautiful. And then it's become a whole art. People want to see graffiti artists. People pay graffiti artists to put a mural in the middle of town, where before it was taboo to even see it on a bus, right? So when creation is so pure, and when we look at creation purely and from a lens of excitement and a lens of acceptance for what is, can we just let it settle and permeate our being? And from that, be like, oh, this is what creation is. It was never meant to be judged. It was never meant to be forced. It is pure expression. And because it is expression, it is beautiful and good.
I think it's also having the discernment to choose it, right? It's just making me think of like inventors and like getting downloads and stuff and like how you're saying they're like, oh, I wish I had invented that. Like I'd be rich, or I wish I had invented that because that's really freaking cool. And it's like, I think that we've all, or more than one person receives the same download. It's just who decides to take action on it and who decides to create it, who decides to do that, who decides to follow it. And that's what that's making me think of. It's like seeing the beauty in the download that you receive and following it. Again, attuning to the frequency of it, seeing the beauty of it and saying, okay, I'm going to be led here.
And that's bringing forward for me that once you make that decision and you allow yourself to be led, there's not always comfort in what you're creating. And we're not just talking about the discomfort we talked about with the nervous system and the mind, but also the creation itself might not feel comfortable. The creation itself might be the creation of something that you're like, "Ugh," like not really, you're not savoring it a ton, right? You're not savoring it a ton. Your ego preference is kind of like, mm, I don't really know. And those are the times when we doubt our discernment and we doubt our decision. And we're like, is this really, was I misled? Or we're never misled, right? But did I receive that wrong? And so it's being able to continue to be in the sensation with the divine, that attunement to creation that you were talking about, Jenna, right? Staying in connection with that during the creation process, knowing and having that clarity within the creation process without attachment to even the process of its unfolding, because are we meant to be in appreciation and an enjoyment of the process of creation? Yes, we are, but I want to be real here too. And the reality is sometimes we are creating and the process doesn't feel like we thought it should feel, or it doesn't feel as enjoyable. And you can say, well, that's the, means to an end kind of thing. Well, I'm going to do this because it's a means to an end. But that's not what I'm talking about, because that's very cognitive and that's very attached to the outcome of what you're creating. It's more like I am willing to be present in the process of the clarity that comes from my attunement with the divine, regardless of what it feels like within my delivery now, because I know it as truth. How does that land? Nina, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I had so much come through. I just look back at Earth, right? We can glean so much truth from just the natural seasons that we get to witness, every turn of the season. And part of the creation that brings us into spring, which we're very close to, is having gone through fall and winter. This season when we see things coming to an end and crumbling and dying, right? And sometimes we can be scared of that death. Sometimes we can have a distaste for it. But without that very integral process of creation, we don't leave room for more. We don't leave room for refinement and for all that's to come. And so it's like having, like, I don't know how many times you guys have brought in fruit into the house and you're like fully intentional of, I'm bringing it in, I'm going to eat this by this time. And you keep on waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then it rots and you're like, ugh, I let it rot and it just grosses you out. And you're like, why did I do that? And you want to like shame yourself for doing it. But it's part of the process. Everything that is created eventually has to go through its season of ripeness to rotting to decay, and then it just feeds. Because I could throw it out in the trash and say, oh, it was no good, or I can toss it outside and let it be taken up by earth and let it be used and catalyzed and feed the earth. So, how many times with just our own creative process, like I like to draw, and sometimes the drawings don't come out the way I want it, and there's iterations of it. And either I can get mad and just toss them all in the trash, or I can keep the revisions and the iterations in my folder and say, oh, look at the progress I've made. Look at how these mistakes, these not quite right versions of it have led me into this one. And this one looks more complete and more authentic than the original image in my mind, or the original frequency in my heart has been amplified and refined through the process of creation. And it felt icky and it felt like I was forcing and it felt like I was pulling. But that itself was part of the process and part of the refinement of my lens for it to come out informed, more aligned to the frequency that was meant to come through. And I think sometimes Source gives us a taste of frequency and allows us to take off with the taste of frequency without it being the fullness of what it's supposed to be. Like a lot of times we want the full download. I want the full course yesterday. But what if I just have one piece? And part of creating the full course is going through the process of the creation, going through the struggle of, do I want this part added? Oh, I have this part, but it's too much information, and now I need to condense it. And where will it feed who it's meant to feed the most? Because maybe I need all of it in order to refine how I'm presenting it. But does the other person need everything that came with it? Maybe not. And I think we get to trust who gets to receive the fullness and who gets to receive the package, right? The neatly wrapped with a bow. So yeah, that's what was coming up for me, without getting more verbose. Jenna.
I like that. And I think that a lot of that is just also the attunement, right? The attunement to the creation is how you attune to that service and that desire and the thread that you decide to pull on through quote unquote time, like how you're attuning to it at any given moment. And then that's how you are going to receive it with how your frequency is matching it. And it's how it's either meant or not meant to be received in that moment. And as you attune more to it, you hold more, you receive more, and you serve differently, you express differently. And it's just a matter of how you're attuning in any given moment.
And having grace with ourselves in the process of that continual attunement, right? Because we're always continuing to be attuned to this. It's a gradual attunement process sometimes with that tasting that Nina was talking about, right? And that we do get to trust that what is coming through our filter and what is kind of left on that lens is for us to see at that moment. And that we're not meant to rush ahead. We're meant to be in space and in presence with what that tastes like. Like let yourself deeply immerse in just that little nugget, right? And it's also, I think, an invitation, and this depends on the creation, right? Like some were meant to be invited into deeper receipt of, deeper saturation, just like you were saying, about, sometimes we're meant to take all of it and sometimes we're not. And so it's like, at what depth am I meant to receive this as well? And that's when we're in that attunement, then we know that. We know that. And I think that that's also the grace that comes in within our delivery of what's coming through, because sometimes that delivery doesn't feel like what we desire or what we think we desire to be. It might feel too soft. It might feel too harsh. It might feel too, flighty. But recognizing that there is a reason the energy is coming through in the form of sensation it is. And that duly serves us and whatever's being created or whoever's part of that with us. Does that make sense?
And I think that's where you get into co-creation, right? Is the invitation into your attunement, how you're receiving it, and then how that expresses through you in conversation or in communion with another person who is also attuning themselves.
And for me, it's just a thank you for my refinement. Thank you for my refinement. Thank you for continuing to refine me because they can be micro shifts, right? It doesn't have to be this big thing, but I think that it's the recognition, as much as we've talked about what we're creating today, there's also the refinement of yourself as the container, as the filter, and being grateful for wherever we're being invited to refine that we are a creation, that we are an unfolding creation as well. And to recognize that what's being delivered through us is also providing a refinement of ourselves as a container. So, Nino, do you have any last thoughts before we close this one up?
Yeah, the last thing on the heels of what you were saying was creation is transformative. The process itself, it transforms us, it refines us at the same time that the form and the conversations and the frequency when we walk around the world after and during that creation space, um, it totally shifts more than me and you, it shifts the entire world, right? And it gets to be simple acceptance and decision to be moved by the process of creation.
Yeah, and what I got from what you said, Laura, was also like what came in, and I was like, ooh, is that when you said that we are creation too, right? Is that God is attuning to us just as much as we are to it. And I was just like, oh yeah.
Yeah, that feels really, really good. And that's the co-creative piece. Because I think when we think of co-creation, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to meet what comes through me. We've talked a lot about what comes through us, but it's also recognizing that this is mutual. This is an exchange, right? And that our decisions, our expression is also imprinting onto consciousness as well, which is a receipt by source and a reflection of source as well. So this was really beautiful. And I'm excited for our next episode. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today. And let us know if you have any questions or reflections that come up for you in the comments. And we will see you very soon. Bye for now.